Kill Complacency, a podcast that inspires growth and intentionality and helps you overcome your greatest obstacles.
My guest today is Tyler Dickerhoof, and you are from Spokane, Washington. We tried to do an interview on your show, and now here you are on mine.
Yeah.
There's cows in your background. I know
you
got an egg background. Indiana, Illinois, I can't remember.
Ohio
is way off. Tyler, I'm curious about on the intentional question I asked, you wrote that you read a proverb every day.
Yeah.
So I know you are a builder and you are a leader. So talk to me about real quickly, how does reading a proverb of the day shape your day?
So as of today, 2,453 days. So just over, I think that's pushing 8 years. How does that shape my day? Man, I learned this from my mentor that you just don't end up where you want to be. It takes intention. And so when I was encouraged to start reading Proverbs, I'd heard from a friend probably 20 years ago. It was a peer coworker, and his grandfather had encouraged him to read Proverbs every day. It's like, okay, interesting. Not something I took on at that point. And then I had a coach back in 2018, and his coach encouraged him. So I started reading Proverbs every day and haven't stopped since. And that was a phase of life where I was trying to grow. I was trying to grow in my wisdom, trying to grow in my leadership capacity and ability and understanding. And it's something that is like, all right, well, this is something I can do that will feed me, fuel me, and help me. And, to the question of how does that impact my day? Well, you don't just end up somewhere. You get there intentionally. So if you want to grow in an area, whether it's wisdom, whether it's, learning financial literacy, whether it is, you name it, doesn't matter. If you commit to doing it every day, what you accomplish in a month, in 6 months, a year, 5 years will far exceed anything that you could set out and try to accomplish without understanding that, because it continues to just add and layer and add and layer and add and layer. And what's amazing to me is there's a proverb that I highlighted today. And each time I read, I try to read in a different version because it gives it a different context and flavor. And I think I've gone through 12 or 15 different versions over the years now. And this one hit me, this verb today, Proverbs 32. And what's interesting, having read Proverbs 8 years, and this verse hit me for the first time about 3 months ago. And I've probably read this chapter, 30, no less than 90 times. And only in the last 2 or 3 did it hit me. And it's, again, Proverbs 32. Surely I am too stupid to be a man. I have not the understanding of a man. One of the premises in the book that I wrote, The Things We Hide, is we all have fears and insecurities. And to me, that goes back to the author. And now whether this is Ukiah, whether this is Solomon, I think not exactly sure you get into those last chapters, but whoever that was, they were king. And they said, surely I am too stupid to be a man. I have not the understanding of a man. That is someone to me saying, I have fears and insecurities. Not necessarily comforting, but just this understanding we all do. We all have fears and insecurities. And the sooner that we own them, as did this writer in this passage, the sooner that we own them, the sooner that we can start to reframe what they mean.
What is a fear and insecurity that you have overcome, and how did you do that?
I'm going to jump in there and say we never overcome our fears and insecurities. Never. The Apostle Paul wrote about the thorn in his flesh. I believe that was his fears and insecurities. That's my belief. And to think that we could overcome it, we discount the power that the devil has, because he knows that's exactly where to poke us. But what we can do is recognize them, and we can recognize when they show up, and we can recognize how they impact us and affect others. And then we can start to mitigate that response, but we'll never overcome.
For sure.
Because it'll always be there. And Peter Drucker, in one of his literary works, wrote about the corkscrew effect. And the corkscrew effect, he essentially says, is that whatever you face today will come back around at a later point. Now, the choice is, are you going to be higher on that corkscrew or lower? Are you going to be more capable of dealing with it or less capable? That's your opportunity. And, coming back to the fears and insecurities, my greatest fear and insecurity is, do I have value? Am I worthy? Do I have value? Am I enough? And that's been the case since I can, track back into my, I would say, late single digit, early teen, double digit ages, somewhere in that period where I wasn't real athletic. I was smart. I was interested in things that the rest of my peers weren't. I grew up on a farm and that was different. And so all of that was like, oh, where do I have value? How do I fit in? And what's interesting is even when I started the personal development work that I'm on, I thought at one point, oh, we can overcome our fears and insecurities. And then it's like, oh, no. Once you get past one loop on the corkscrew, there's another thing, something that comes. And all of a sudden that same insecurity props up again. Because I don't have like different insecurities. They're central to the same. Am I valued? Do I have value?
Sure.
Now that could be in my physical appearance. That can be in, my works and efforts. That could be in my relationship, period. And it comes to that. It's like, all right, how do I own that? How do I understand it? But then moreover, what do I do in response? And to me, that's the biggest opportunity is recognize, as I tell people, it's like, look at your insecurity as someone sitting across the room on the chair or couch and just say, hey, I see you. I know you're here. Okay, may show up. But the ability to do that in relationship with others, to say, hey, sorry, my insecurity showing. Sorry, I was a little too short. I was a little too intense. You know what? I just left because I didn't know what to deal with it. That was my insecurity. And if we can recognize how our insecurity shows up and own it, then all of a sudden our ability to be in relationship with others goes up.
Is step one recognizing it?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it. Recognize your fears and insecurities. Step two is own it. Own it, how it shows up. I had a conversation with a guy yesterday who happened to be probably, I think, according to his bio, he's done more polygraph tests for the Secret Service than anyone else, named Brad Beeler. And we're discussing how these things show up. And he goes, it all shows up. Now, can you read it? As far as him interrogating someone, questioning, doing all of those things, does he have the ability to get the answer out of them that he needs? Because they're showing some cards. Even if it's the back of the cards, they're showing something, because we all do. How can we start to discern what those mean? And so as I work through and as I talk to people and as I've done this myself, the moment I say, hey, my insecurity is showing, everyone's like, oh, finally, you admitted it. Finally owned it, because I knew it was something. I just didn't know what it was. I didn't know exactly what in the moment made it happen, but I knew it was there. I could see it from a mile away. And as I talked to Brad yesterday and understand the body language is we understand more than we realize. Instinctually, survival wise, we understand when insecurity is showing in people more than we can vocalize, internalize, interpret, and understand. Our body is telling us there's something here, there's something here, there's something here, there's something here, whether we understand that or not. And so all of a sudden we start tune into that. Oh, that's why they are what they are. Okay, I get it. It's okay. That's why they reacted in that way. Or when you can start to own it yourself and people are like, oh, that's why? Oh, okay. Yeah, I feel the same. We're good.
Yeah. Talk to me real briefly about when you begin this process. And I'm curious to know, Tyler, what effect it had on your marriage as you work through your fears and insecurities. Did it have a ripple effects there too, or no?
The exact effect, I don't have to ask my wife. I don't know. I mean, I think the thing that I've seen and working through the book that I wrote, but that's just I've been doing that same work for the last 7 years.
Sure.
And so it wasn't new. And, to see her response to reading the words for the first time and, interacting with people, it's like, yeah, dude's done the work. Like, do I still have moments where, I get a little intense that my, insecurity shows up? Yeah, because it happens. Now, the difference is either double down on it and say, no, the problem's not me, it's you, or say, oh, no, I'm the problem. Yeah, I didn't handle that right. I responded, inappropriately. Okay. We all need grace. We all need to ask for forgiveness. The difference is if you, one, don't acknowledge it or continue to repeat the same pattern over and over again without the ownership.
I think it's great you said own it, because that is the opposite of this, right? Because a lot of times we're so fearful. I mean, you'll see this with people. They'll be so fearful to own it that they'll lie. I mean, I say this all the time to people, like, dude, if you just told me the truth, like, no big deal, just own it. Because nobody cares, right? Once you own it. It's very, you don't own it, that everyone's like, come on, Tyler's figured out, Tyler. You're driving us all down or whatever.
Here's what's amazing about that. I've had a couple instances, and whether it's friends, podcast guests, or whatever, and get into this conversation subject. And, one podcast guest has said, people really don't have as big an issue with the sin, the transgression, bigger issue with the cover up.
Yeah, exactly.
And there was a gentleman that was on my podcast. We talked all about that. And he shared those exact words. He ended up public figure who admitted to covering up an affair. This is why I bring that. It's one thing to recognize what to say, how to say, the answers. It's another to throw your arms in the air and say, yeah, this is what I'm struggling with right now. And that's where it comes back from a leadership perspective is, we lose trust in the leaders that not when they admit their faults and their transgressions, it's kind of like, do as I say, not as I do.
Yes.
That's when you lose all credibility and influence. And you and I had this conversation. We started to have this conversation about parenting older children, adults, young adults. And we started to go down that path. And then, as you mentioned, we had some internet issues, recording issues, and get to come back to this. And I think the thing that I've been encouraged to do and I've done, and if I were to have my 3 kids, I perceive what the interpretation is, but I don't know, is the ability to take ownership and say, I didn't do that right. Ask for forgiveness. I messed up. I did it wrong. The ability to do that, I think, has probably impacted them more than they realize, because how often do leaders, people in authority, or parents do that? Yeah, I screwed up in how I parented you. I did not lead you appropriately. When a leader says that to someone, they can be like, yeah, you didn't. Thanks for owning it. And then all of a sudden the relationship goes forward, as opposed to that being a massive chasm. Because once someone does not admit or does not openly say, yeah, I didn't do that right, you're always questioning, when's it going to happen again?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have 3 kids that are adult kids, and I've got 3 kids that are 16, 12, and 9.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to have those conversations with the adult kids and to say, hey, I know you've got some wounds for me. What could I have done better? And what can I do better for your siblings? And I find myself, when I've had these conversations, Tyler, then to get defensive sometimes and say, well, you just don't know how it is. And I know as soon as I say that, I'm building a wall with my adult kids. And they're like, well, forget telling dad, get trying to help. We have to be mindful of not taking offense.
Well, that's first. And it's hard because no one intends to do the wrong thing. As even people that do commit, I would say, harmful acts, it's often a response in some way, shape, or form in the moment, decades ago. And not taking ownership and then not trying to at least give perspective doesn't help people. I describe empathy. I define empathy as putting your arms around someone and walking with them. Now, there's a couple different extents to that. The first is it takes vulnerability. If I'm going to put my arm around someone, I'm exposing myself. Here's the next thing that is spiritual doctrine in alignment. Don't be unequally yoked.
Sure.
If I put my arm around someone and they do the same to me, that's essentially like a yoke that would be like on an oxen. Well, the idea of don't be unequally yoked, if you understand the concept of what that means, is if 2 oxen of different ability, size, and strength, one pulls faster than the other, they're going to choke each other out. When they would pair oxen, they would intentionally pair them on size and strength and ability so they evenly pulled and train as much. And that's one interpretation of that statement is don't be unequally yoked. And when I put my arm around someone and be empathetic, I have to be as interactive with them as I want them to be with me. I have to say, hey, you don't understand this. This is not an excuse. This is why I made the decision I made. And I know that may not sink into you, but that's the rationale. And maybe at some point you'll better understand it. And I'm not expecting to understand because you don't have fully that perspective, but I need to share. Yeah, I had a situation with my son, and this is going back maybe 2 months ago, month and a half ago, give or take. And there's a situation where I made a statement to one of his coaches. All right. And he got very upset about it. That I would have a conversation with his coach.
Okay.
And what it came down to is he didn't want me to engage in that way, which is fine. He's 18 now. I have to understand, yep, that's no longer my place. Got it. Awesome. But I also said this. I know you're frustrated here, and I know maybe you've been frustrated in the past where I decided to engage. But here's something that I've always committed to, and this is my standard of what I will stand up for and what I won't. When it comes to my children's or someone else's, a player that I have coached or someone that I see, I will always unilaterally, regardless of who it is, stand up for safety and ill treatment. If I see that, you're going to get guns a-blazing. When I coach soccer, I would tell the referees, like, hey, I understand it's all subjective. Like, you're going to have calls you miss or not. But when it comes to a safety issue, you better hold on. because I am going to. And there was one time my kids were little. And the goalie, which happened to be my son in that case, came out for the ball and got absolutely taken out. Totally uncalled for, like should have been, if you understand soccer, a red card. The referee, I don't know if he called a foul or not. If he did call a foul, it was just something pretty benign. And I came unglued. Did it have partly to do with my son? No, but there had also been other injuries where it was starting to compound, where it's like, this is a safety issue. And ultimately the referee, came over, pushed me back to the sideline. I said, I told you, we're going to be good. But the moment it comes to a safety issue, that's when I'm going to really step forward. And, so again, explaining that to my son and frustration, whether or not, it's like, you can be upset with me and you can be upset with my choices, and that's fair. And I have to evaluate the choices and the things I did, but understand that my rationale has and always been in the frame of mind. I am going to stand up, go to bat, and look out for people's safety, even when they aren't looking out for their own. And does that mean it's right? No, I was wrong. I can accept that. I apologize. Like, that conversation will never happen again. The reason why I did it was X. Doesn't justify me doing it, but understanding, hey, you may be upset with me, but this was the frame of mind that I'm always going to, work with it. Understand you're 18 now? Okay. That's a different conversation. I can't have those looking out for you because you want that agency for yourself. It's no different for, people in our organization that we lead. Hey, what are your values? These are my values. Great. My value is courage. One of my key values. And when it comes to courage, is like, I'm going to be courageous and I'm going to ask you to be too. And when it comes to a situation that, why did you do what you do? It's like, I, believe in how I define courage is I'm willing to do the right thing regardless of the outcome. I'm willing to make a fool of myself in service of others. That's courage to me. It kind of goes along the lines with integrity. It's never wrong to do the right thing. And, as much as our society challenges in those ways, and there's a difference between forcing that on people, but saying, hey, these are the bases of my actions. And if I'm wrong, okay, I'm wrong. But this was the metric of the decision tree. Now, if I act in a way that I was wrong, I have to own it. I can't make excuses. I can't blame. It's not a blame, but it's like, okay, in that moment, my courage.
And certainly, Tyler, you've had those conversations with employees, right? Where they've done something and maybe you've wondered why, but they come back and they tell you either the courage story or the integrity story. And you say, you know what? You did the best you could with your circumstances.
Yeah.
And even though it's not the way I would have done it,
accepting that people aren't going to do it the way you want it done. And that isn't a bad thing, nor is it wrong. I mean, but there's a difference between this is the standard.
Yes.
And kind of, there's a process, there's a framework, but it's also.
Sometimes it's a good thing, though. They teach you something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we wouldn't have a wheel today if someone wouldn't have decided, hey, I think there's a better way to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Think about all the things we'd still have if someone didn't try to make it better.
It's funny. I've related the advent of AI, which has become very mainstream, right? Artificial intelligence, I would say it's not a fringe. It's a main thing. And, I've talked to people, it's like, oh, do you embrace it or not? It's like, well, we've seen this before. You and I come both from a farming background. At some point, my grandfather ultimately and his father had to make the decision between farming with horses or tractors.
Yeah.
Same decision. If they could have kept farming with horses, probably be Amish. Okay.
Yeah.
It is what it is. Or choose to farm with tractors. Now, what's hilarious is growing up in Amish country, which I know, Iowa is a lot of Amish as well. And the Amish of Northeast Ohio is very divergent. But I saw this video the other day where there's this Amish farmer. He's using 6 horses. So a 16 horse pulling a generated motor that's pulling a mechanical disc bind, which is mowing the field. And it's just hilarious because of twisting. And it's not the old mechanical stuff. It is no, we're going full on pushing the limits. And it's like saying, hey, I'm going to write my book I'm going to write my book. I'm going to type it all out. But as I'm typing it all out, it's just, we could convey it in different ways. And it's just, okay, there's layers to this, but it's the idea of, we have to make those decisions. And the great leadership journey is to let open hands and say, all right, how do we go with this?
Talk about farming, how much it's changed since the 80s with seeds. They're drought resistant and plant them early, plant them late. There's so many less variables than there were when you and I were kids.
What I think the general society does not understand is how technologically advanced agriculture is as an industry. Now, granted, the spectrum is pretty wide. We talked about the difference from Amish to, the modern, massively technical robotics. I mean, there is full-on robotics in all of agriculture.
Tractors kind of are anymore with GPS.
Oh, I mean, I've seen manufacturers that have created full robotics.
Mm-hmm.
It's either joystick control or it is type it all on a computer. It goes to the field, does its thing, and operates. There's robotic mowers that you can get that, you can mow whatever field or lawn 100% robotic. There's that. I mean, milking, dairy cows. There are full robotic milking systems. Like cows voluntarily go and get milk. There's not someone there as in the old that is sitting down on a stool with a pail and squeezing their teats to get milk. No, it's fully robotic. And what's amazing to me is, again, and coming from agriculture, is that people maybe don't appreciate all of that. But here's the great factor in all of it, is it still takes human interaction and leadership. There's still a place for it. And it didn't fully extinguish. Hey, you have a mechanism that's robotic. You have an unmanned tractor. Still needs fuel, whether that's electric or diesel or whatever. You still are going to need repairs. You're still going to have things in the field like rocks and things you're going to have to human interact. And, so it isn't this complete devoid, but it just increases the level of interaction. And as I've interacted with most people, we've talked about this, is what it drives and creates is that the human side of what we're talking about, the insecurities, the ownership, that gets more imperative, not less.
For sure. That will never go away. Another technical advance with farm, I'm saying this because in the background, you got your cows and your fence. But, we have these GPS guided fences now.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
And guys can rotational graze without having to move a fence every day. They just
here's what's
their phone
amazing to me that I know the guy who invented, I think it's called Halter in New Zealand. And, as I sit here and you saw earlier, my dog, my Rottweiler, and we've had a GPS collar on our dog for years. Like, don't think twice about it. People, whether it's a halo color, it's like, oh, cows are, they can be trained just as much. You have an electric fence. Why, don't they go through the electric fence? They don't want to get shocked. Now, some of them,
the easiest to train that way.
Well, some of them don't care. Let's be honest. I've had cows that just completely go through it. Like I've had.
Yeah, but have you had goats? Because goats don't care at all.
Goats don't care. No, goats really don't care.
Horses just lean over.
Yeah, the goats will make a game of it. Oh, you think this is going to keep me and watch me? But coming back to the training, the technology, it's there and it's pretty amazing. And here's the piece of our life is we can be scared of that stuff or we can embrace it and say, how does this make the human experience better?
For sure. And whether it's farming or writing a book or whatever with AI, artificial intelligence, like I think it's a 10-80-10, right? The human has to have that 10%. That AI can make up that 80%, do the writing, do the coding, do the whatever, do a lot of the, the planting or the GPS coordinate, whatever. But the farmer still has to come in at the end and put a signature on it. And that's the last 10% and make the decisions and sell the grain and collect the grain, all those things. So,
and you could automate a lot of that. It's same essence, 10-80-10, in a different way to look at it. You plant the seed, you let it grow, you harvest, right? And that growing period really doesn't take much human interaction. And another perspective is, you scoop the ice cream, you allow everyone to put on the toppings, and then you put the cherry on top. And it's really about that, what do you do to put the cherry on top? And that's the greatest opportunity for many, many, many leaders is not to, I'm going to take over. It's like you imagine you walk into someone's house and it's so beautifully decorated. It's someone to just take that painting and just move it a quarter of an inch. It's like, oh, it's perfect, right? And that doesn't take away, but that just gives that extra acknowledgement of, I'm going to put the cherry on top. I'm going to do that extra to make it just that much better. That's what our opportunity is. And it enhances the work that everyone else has done.
Let's talk about your book. I know your opening story is a hook. It's a great hook. It's a farm accident. Talk to me about your book and talk to me. I mean, that was a pretty big event when you were 14 there. Talk to me about how that shaped you and how that has helped you be in a position of leadership and helping people today.
If you and I are talking 10 years ago, probably don't talk about it at all.
Okay.
I don't even think that it's impacted or affected me. Partly the title, The Things We Hide. This event happened in 1994, so 32 years ago. And so when I'm talking 10 years ago, 22 years after the incident, I don't think it has any impact and effect. And quite honestly, the incident in and of itself, and as you alluded to, when I was 14, I had a younger brother die in a farming accident. He was 3, and one afternoon I drove over him and he died instantly. And while that's massive, right? That incident in and of itself, I don't look back and say, oh man, these are all the ways that it shaped me. No, as I've told this to people, and it's part of my faith. It's probably one of the bigger foundational pieces of me in appreciating God's grace is in just over 32 years now. Never once. And there's only one thing that I can attribute that to is God, because I've seen how guilt has riddled people in much smaller circumstances. And I've seen how the impact of accidents and death and the guilt has just absolutely fractured everything about people. I had as a family passed, my grandfather and 3 of my uncles died in a house fire. Ironically, if it may be, my uncle who survived was 14 as well. And he lived a life for the next 51 years of survivor's guilt. I saw, whether I understood or later not, how that impacted him. And I can remember even the summer probably after my brother died, of having a walk with him and having a conversation with him. And I can just vividly see the picture of it. I don't remember maybe the conversation, but I can just imagine he implored in that moment. It's like, it was an accident. And I've held on to that. I've understood that from the moment of the sheriff questioning me on that day. But here's where it impacted me, and I didn't even realize. How I responded to that moment was put my head down and push. I describe that as intensity. And some people look at intensity as like, oh yeah, that drives business. It's great. It's like, okay. Intensity, I describe it as a bulldozer. If you and I want to clear an area to build a building, bulldozer's a great tool. But if I want to, do something that is much more nimble and soft, a bulldozer is just going to cause damage. If I want to clear an area just to plant some seeds in my garden, a bulldozer is just going to, it's going to destroy things. It's not going to be the most effective tool. And that's what I found in that event. My response was put my head down and push. And what I've heard many times from different interactions and different people, and almost just took it for what it was, like, oh, you're intense. I'm like, yeah, I am. Yeah. But it was many, 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 many years later where, again, coming back to, God and his influence on me and dealing with a employment issue, a situation where an employee called off. They asked for the day off. They were sick. And it's like, okay, no problem. And come to find out later the next day, they were at our gym because we owned a gym working out. And they were supposed to be cleaning. And it's like, oh, we got a problem here. This doesn't work. And my pathway forward was either get with it or get gone. Very intense, insensitive. And it was in that moment where I heard God one moment say, this is how you deal with it. Okay, I'm listening. It took me back to that moment when my brother died and I'm being questioned by the sheriff. And he's just asked me question after question after question. And eventually said, I'm done. I'm not going to answer anymore. And what as we talk about this, how did that incident impact me? It was that. Because I learned how to get through hard things was just put my head down and push. And what I understood much, much later in life is how I dealt with my insecurities popping up. As we've talked about before, it's like they'll pop up and I'm wondering my value. What do? I put my head down and push, as opposed to say, yep, okay, I'm not sure how to get forward here. It was that processing and that understanding. And as I, have shared now about my brother Joel, and there's another moment there is I didn't talk about it. Had people read my book that have known me 12, 20, 30 years. Didn't know. Didn't talk about it. I didn't think it mattered. But then all of a sudden, understanding how do I give a life who walked on this earth and lived on this earth's purpose, even though he's only 3, I can do it by telling the story and the impact and the lessons and the learnings. Because it's this book that gives my brother's life purpose. It's because of that incident that it's like, oh, I got to deal with some things. I have to deal with my fears and insecurities and how they show up and how they affect and impact and destroy relationships. And that's where all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, let's go with this.
I'm going to read your book, but it's because I need the message. Because that's my tendency is to avoid. And I use the word fine a lot. And years ago, after being married a little bit, my wife would say, how do I look? I'd say fine.
That doesn't go well.
I feel fine. Well, and finally one day she said, when you say fine, what do you mean? And I said, could be better, could be worse. And she was like, oh.
Did you take a shovel as you were digging that hole, Marty? Or did you just, I'm going to barehand it?
But I use that word a lot, and it's a complacency word. It's a lack of acknowledging the thing that's out there. We hide it. And I dismiss so much, like you, raised on a farm, but like you, I know how to put my head down and make things happen. The term we use growing up, because we shared a lot of sheep, we use the word rammy.
Okay. Get ran. Yeah.
Yeah, it's intensity, but we
Yeah.
get rammy. And that means we're
Just
going to be
go.
the bulldozer. We are going to make it happen.
Yep.
And so I appreciate your book. I appreciate you sharing your story. And because I think a lot of us, I don't think I'm alone on this. I don't think you're alone on this, who need this message, who realize that there are things we're hiding because of our insecurities. And we would be better people if we would acknowledge them and own them and get the things out of the closet and face up so we can be better.
There's one absolute that I've yet to hear a good explanation from anyone else that this isn't the case. And that every single person living and breathing, as we talked at the very beginning about, the excerpt from Proverbs, everyone has dealt with fears and insecurity. There's no one exempt. And, when it comes back to the message, it's like, I think it is pretty universal because of that. Now, what I do understand as well is that how we deal with our fears and insecurities from a young age as we get older varies.
Sure.
And, as I've seen this, I have an assessment in my book. It's called the 4 walls assessment, where it helps identify, like you've talked about, intensity is the wall I lean against the most. Well, there's also inactivity, which kind of aligns with what you were saying. It's just, I'm fine. I'm just going to move on. There's isolation and insensitivity, which I mentioned earlier. And I think those are absolute? No. But I think most people fit within that house. There's one of those 4 walls lean against the most. And as I've gone through this now, what I find is the people that have done the work on themselves, the people that have start to understand who they are, what they're about, those walls impact them less. So instead of standing against the wall, leaning against the wall, they're more in the middle of the house. Now, as you and I both talked about earlier, we never get rid of our insecurities. We never, fully overcome them. We can recognize them. And so as I would even contend with those people, and as I've gone through myself, it's like, I would hopefully tend that, my relationship with the walls is I'm standing in the middle of the room. Right. But yet I know situations will happen.
For sure.
And guess what?
Buttons.
One of those things will show up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how quickly do I recognize it as that? Really, to me, that lends to the amount of understanding and personal growth. It's one thing to acknowledge, understand, and work through our walls. Just as you and I talked about. I have walls. You have walls too. And so someone that wants to make an impact in life, the ability for us to recognize other people's walls can start to define how we interact with them. And that interaction lends to, if we can accept that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less,
Sure.
lends to our ability to influence them. And influence then is how we make a difference in the world, how we make an impact.
Beautiful. I'm curious, you said there's a test in your book on that?
Yeah, there's an assessment. You do it in the book, or you can scan the QR code, go to a website, automate it, do it for you.
Okay. I'm curious, Tyler, as you've gotten results, maybe you don't know this yet, but do you see that like married couples tend to be on opposite sides of the spectrum on that? Or are they similar? Or does it not matter?
I think does not matter. My wall is intensity. My wife is isolation. Our 2 sons are inactivity.
You get louder almost, and she gets quieter.
Yeah, she's gone. But what's also interesting, and we touched on this a little bit before we hit record, and we talked about this, kind of the impact of, parents. And one of the things that I know, her family, there's no conflict. It's 100% conflict avoidant.
Okay.
There's an iron fist in the house. And then everyone else, you don't have an opinion, you get quiet, and there is no, standing up. My house? No, it wasn't that way. It was loud. It was, a German house that just, heritage or whatever, we understood that or not. It's just, no, we're going to fight. And, oftentimes my wife and I are like, why are we having a fight? I'm like, no, we're just having a discussion. Like, this isn't a fight at all. Like, we're just heated, like, discussion. And in her family, it is, no, you shut up and hide it. And there's a mountain underneath the rug. And that's just the personality. And so for her to have the wall of isolation, meaning she just checks out, she's gone, avoid, complete, doesn't even acknowledge, gone, would be very interesting. I haven't seen this. I really wonder what, because I don't know all of her siblings and her parents. I could imagine.
I can take the test.
Yeah, I can pretty much figure it out. But again, it's that conditioning that we're brought up to.
Sure.
And, there's a personality factor, but there's also a conditioning. So coming back to your question, I think there's probably less correlation between spouses, but then there's a correlation between children and parents or, siblings.
Yeah. Yeah. The book we talked about before the show was How We Love. They talk about that. So they talk about in there how you relate as a couple. But they actually have one for kids as well. The book is very interesting because what it does is it makes you think about your childhood, makes you think how to make your marriage better. And then it makes you think about how you become a better parent. But all of it is about how do I become a better human, which I think is very much what your book's about, right? I mean, that's what we're driving. That's the nail that we're trying to hit is how do we become better people? And then we do it by getting out the things we're trying to hide to eliminate the fears and insecurities.
Yeah.
Tyler, I always wrap up with 4 questions.
All right, let's go.
First question, what are you doing right now that your future self will say thank you, Tyler, for?
It's working on this book, the next books, those things, whether I understand the impact at all or, that will be seen in the future. I don't know, but it's, do the work.
Got more books coming?
Yeah. This first one kind of is the first step. My community, my leadership keynotes and things that I do has another 2 segments to it. So technically this is the first of 3. So there's a couple more books. And then there's also probably a daily Proverbs book at some point sometime as well.
Curious on that one. You'll have to use several translations, huh?
I'm looking forward to that.
It won't be NIV. It'll be...
Well, yeah. I mean, to be able to go a full year and think about it, it's like, how do you get the most out of it? And, we have the luxury today of having so many different translations that help us discern the components just a little differently.
Yeah.
And, as I found, it's like, depending on where you're at, how it's going to hit you.
Tyler, if you could go back and speak to your younger self, what message would you give him? Say your 22-year-old self.
Don't hide who you are. Embrace it. I mean, there's another element, and maybe you can appreciate this, Marty, is, growing up, a little different today in 2026, but growing up, in our society, being a farm kid was not a cool thing, was not revered, and was most often jeered. And, even we go back a number of years is, you see my cows walk in the background. You see this cow crossing sign. We go back 10 years and you don't see much of that.
COVID really pushed the hobby farms.
Whether it was COVID and people wanting to, find a different pace and style of life.
Yeah. Whatever.
I would say Yellowstone and some of those shows that did not exist. I mean, I grew up, Loathsome Dove was like awesome. That was the closest thing to agriculture that we had in, or City Slickers. Even City Slickers, the end of the story was very embracive, but the entire start and beginning of the show was a mockery of agriculture in a lot of ways. And, so it's kind of like that was the temperament. I grew up in a rural community and still felt out of place because I grew up on a farm. Going back to my younger self, like, hey, embrace it instead of hide it.
I want to come back to that after I say this. We were at a graduation this weekend, and there were a bunch of teenage girls there, and they all looked the same. And my wife and I were talking about it. And if you could, Tyler, just for a minute, could you just speak to that generation? I just wish that these girls could be themselves. So could you give me a quick message to the younger generation?
I'll tie it back. We've talked about 2 of my core values, integrity and courage. And the last one is authenticity. Be willing to be the real you because everyone is begging you to be. It's funny as you say that, they all look the same. My 2 boys in high school, one's going to be a senior, one's going to be a junior. And up until I think the last week, every single kid on the team, 12, 13 players, had the exact same haircut. They look exactly the same. And it's funny, I think about my nephew and I could probably go through his team and they live in California, apart from Washington, and they look pretty much the same. And it's funny because, social media has driven this. Whereas like I grew up like, man, you didn't know other than TV, you didn't know what other hairstyles, like maybe magazines. And so
I got a buzz cut.
yeah, you had the hairstyle of whatever, the barber or whatever you thought was different. And, this idea of be willing to be you. And as much as our society has, driven that in today's culture, we've very much driven it to the derogatory. I've learned this from talking to my kids and seeing people in high schools or whatever. It's, it used to be the groups that stuck together were by achievement. National Honor Society, I was an FFA, you had sports, you had those things. Today, that's not the case. It's, do you have a difference of, I would say, ideology group? Do you have a difference of gender persuasion? Do you have a difference in, learning ability, disabilities? Those are all I would say, where do I have a divergent opinion, thought process? Sure. That's what gives me community as opposed to where are my strengths? What am I good at? being what I'm acknowledged for, as opposed to coming back to, especially I see this that, as I talk to teachers and kids, it's like, yeah, it's more of the groups of, oh, am I in the slow learner, the extras given, the, those things. It's like, that's what groups gravitate to, away from the accolades of sports and academics or any of those things you're really great and interested in. And I think that's the big challenge in what I've had to embrace too and understand. And there's a chapter in my book about it. And I learned this lesson from a mentor of mine and, kind of two friends. And it's this idea. I grew up maybe much the same, on a farm. You had to pretty much be good at a lot of things. And I thought, hey, the more things I'm good at, the more value I'll have. Let me ask you this question. Marty, if I ask you to go into your kitchen and we're going to cut a prime rib, we're going to cut a roast, we're going to cut brisket, we're going to cut, a turkey, we're going to cut something special. Describe the knife that you're going to use to me.
Going to be a longer one, but skinny.
Do you know exactly where the knife is?
Yeah.
Can you tell me to walk into your kitchen and get it?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, we're going to eat that meal with utensils. Can you go tell me which fork in your drawer is your favorite special fork that I need to eat this meal with?
Just grab one.
Exactly. And that's the lesson of life, is be the sharpest knife in the kitchen, not all the utensils in the drawer. And that's something that I had to learn and embrace. And it's like, oh, wow. And I had a friend, kind of not quite that exercise, but similar. He said, it's like, you want to make an impact on people?
No, I don't know.
Exactly. Give them a knife that they know is the sharpest and the most special knife, and they will revere that thing.
There's guys that take their knives on camping trips.
Oh, yeah, of course. There's a special knife. And so when you think about this idea of, my encouragement to the person listening, be the sharpest knife in the kitchen, because that's what everyone needs. And so do what only you can do. Now, it may seem out of place. It may seem unique now, but you hone that, you continue to sharpen that knife, man, there's a place for you that people will yearn for.
I wish I could give you a formula on it, but I don't know. But my kids are very confident in who they are. They tend to not care. But what happens then is my kids become the leaders because they are different and people will gravitate and follow them, almost sometimes to the point my kids get annoyed with it. And they'll be like, well, everyone came over to this side of the room. I'm going to see if they'll follow me over there. So to your point, yeah, it's amazing when you do become the sharpest knife, when you do become that leader, people do respect you because you are different. And you're not just blending in.
What's interesting about that is whether we understand it or not, that's who we look to follow in society. The person that has that confidence, that person that is willing to go achieve what they want to achieve. The real defining, I guess, qualifier of a leadership is, do you have a vision that you're going after? And if you have a vision that you're going after and you invite other people to be a part of that, dude, you will have a massive following. And that's really, what I understood is like, man, I can have this vision, but if I'm a bulldozer, people aren't going to follow me because I'm running them over. I have to invite them in. I have to go with them. And that's the element of leadership, is like, how are you willing to invite people in to be a part of it? Then they're willing to go.
All right, 2 more questions.
Yes, sir.
Favorite quote or favorite book that's impacted your life?
I would say, again, whether it's a quote, whether it's a verse, it's Philippians 4:13.
Okay, yeah. You know what caught me today in that verse was it says, I can do everything through him who gives me strength.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, I can do everything, but not anything. And God doesn't call me to do anything. He has a specific plan. But within that plan, everything within that plan, he gives me strength for.
And to me, as I've learned so much, you look at, again, the writer, Paul, and, to understand the life that Paul had to be, you want to talk a modern day terrorist that is just out trying to crucify all Christians. Like, he would be the pinnacle of our society's, whatever against Christians. That was him. And then all of a sudden to see him transform in a moment and then become one of the greatest evangelists ever. It's like, wow. I think that's what contends to his insecurities and fears of like, oh, am I worthy? That's my interpretation. But for then him to write and to understand, these challenges, like, all right, I got it, but I can do everything with the strength that God gives me. So whatever you're doing, go through. The strength is there from God, not your own, from God.
My last question for you, if this was your final message, this is it. Something happens to you later today. What do you want the world to know?
Be willing to have integrity. It's never wrong to do the right thing. To have courage is be willing to make a fool of yourself in service of others. Be willing to be you because everyone wants you to be. It takes conditioning to embrace those.
How do people find you, follow you,
Yeah.
get your book?
You can go to my website, tylerdickerhoof.com. You can follow along, look at the programs that I offer, whether it's my Lead Without Hiding challenge that I offer once a month, Free to Lead Roundtable. It's my private community, as well the book, The Things We Hide. You can buy that wherever you buy books. But again, thank you for the opportunity, Marty. Thank you for the conversation. I appreciate it.
This is great. Just wanted to thank you guys for listening to the end. In closing, I just wanted to add that if this message resonates with you, if it aligns with your values and something in it today triggered something, then you can also look me up on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube. We are really trying to help people live more intentional lives to kill the complacency with which they have subscribed to. I know there's many ways which I get sucked in all the time. So if this is beneficial, follow me there.